Welcome to Tickets to Travel, the business of travel experiences. I'm your host, Mario Bauduin, and this is the show where we uncover the stories, strategies, and innovations driving the experience economy. On today's episode, we're thrilled to welcome a true industry expert who has mastered the art of creating unforgettable moments and driving commercial success in the world of theme parks, resorts, and attractions. Tay Mauro. With a career spanning iconic brands like Disney, SeaWorld, and Cedar Fair, Tay has a proven track record of transforming big ideas into thriving businesses. From leading multi-million-dollar ticketing strategies at Disney to revolutionizing annual pass programs at SeaWorld. But Tay's journey didn't just start in the boardroom. It began on the front lines, operating rides and falling in love with the magic of guest experiences. That passion, paired with years of financial and strategic leadership, has shaped him into a trusted consultant, helping brands navigate the ever-evolving experience economy. So whether you're looking to optimize your business or you're just fascinated by how our favorite attractions come to life, you're in for a real treat. Let's dive into the world of commercial strategy and innovation with Tay Mauro. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, because Tickets to Travel starts now. Welcome to Tickets to Travel, the business of travel experiences. I'm your host, Mario Bauduin, and I'm talking to Tay Mauro. Tay, thanks for joining the pod.
Thanks for having me, Mario. Excited to be here.
Awesome. And you know what? What we talk about here at Tickets to Travel mainly is about ticket-first experiences, which I think post-pandemic, and Taylor Swift, I like to give her a lot of credit, was the one who sort of created the experience first, at least currently, how people are looking at it. You want to buy the ticket, you want to get the lodging, the rental car, everything else afterwards, because it's the ticket that drives that travel. So I argue a lot, Tay, that that's not the first time we've had a ticket first type of experience. I always reckon it back to when I was a kid and going to that Disney park or to that regional theme park first, because that was the very first time you wanted to experience something with a ticket. And then you sort of figured out all of the lodging and all the travel components around it. So do you remember the first time you stepped into a theme park and said, I want to work in this industry?
Yeah, great question, and I do. So picture it. I'm in third grade. I'm in northern Indiana. Me, my mom, my dad, my two brothers. It's fall break, and they get to come down to Disney World. We hop on a plane, we fly down to Orlando, and the first park we go to is the Magic Kingdom. It's the big one with the castle here in Orlando. I'm stoked. We walk down Main Street. I shake the mayor of Main Street's hand. Like, how cool is that? And we go to the right, and the very first attraction we go on, some listeners might remember this, was called Alien Encounter. It's this hyper-realistic ride where you are in this arena where these aliens are transporting this other really mean alien into this room, and somehow it gets out. And I remember sitting on my seat, knees up to my chest, not breathing because it was so scary. And we get out of there, and me and my youngest brother are bawling our eyes out. My middle brother was fine. He didn't have any issues with it. But that is the very first memory that I have of going to a theme park. And somehow, even though I still remember that, it still wasn't the best experience, I still fell in love with the industry and the idea of creating these experiences for people.
I think people might have had the similar experience. I do remember Alien Encounter being totally off the wall and weird, but at the same time, it was part of that memory, right? And that question unlocked a memory for you to understand that this experience was going to be sort of building block for your career at some point. And so once you're in a park and you're working through the experience itself, what are some of the other components that I think a regular fan or a guest doesn't really understand that goes into the strategy of getting them on a plane from Indiana to Orlando, Florida?
Yeah. There's the thing I don't think people realize is theme parks are still businesses. And all the major theme parks here in the United States are all public companies. So they have shareholders they got to answer to. And so there's a lot of creative marketing and commercial strategies that goes on top level to really even get you, one, in the consideration set, and two, kind of get you off the couch to come down. And those look like things like the way that tickets and passes are structured, the way that promotions are structured, and then the way that the offerings are set up throughout the year to kind of price into demand and to seasonality. There's all these different things that parks are doing to really drive travel to those destinations.
Right. I mean, being in the online travel industry and working with revenue managers over the last 20 or so years, trying to identify demand in particular is, I think, at core of what they do. And, that comes down to managing ADR and RevPAR and all these different metrics for the hotel side. But what are some of the things that you guys consider on the ticketing side that would sort of influence the travel?
Yeah. So it's not dissimilar to a hotel or an airline, right? When you think revenue management, but the key thing about a theme park is the capacity is not constrained. There's not a limited number of seats or a limited number of hotel rooms. So essentially they have this kind of open-ended opportunity to drive as many people down as they can. And one of the key things that's kind of changed within the industry over the past maybe 5 to 7 years is this idea of date-based ticketing, where you pick a day, you have to pick a day when you're going to come down. You have to buy your ticket in advance and then you come down. And that's opened up all this data and this information for the parks to now have a pace and to understand what that booking curve looks like. Because before you would just buy a ticket online and they wouldn't really know when you would show up. So it offered these challenges for them, but how do they estimate demand? How do they staff to it? And kind of during COVID, a little bit before, they shifted that model. And so now we really think about it as looking at the pace, looking at what that demand is. How does that compare to prior year? And then how can we shift those guests into areas we want and out of areas we don't want them?
Yeah, that's intriguing. All right. As a guy who has, a wife and 2 young kids, 11 and 9 years old, we've done our duty, Tay. We've done 2 trips to Disneyland in Los Angeles, and we've done 2 trips to Disney World in Orlando. I must be really high up on the type of audience that you guys would target from a theme park perspective. So what are the dynamics, I guess, in terms of how you look at individual, let's say, Disney adults, a sort of, crazy super fans, if you will, versus the family dynamics? Like, you've been in commercial strategy for these type of parks. Like, how do you guys approach, I guess, packaging and ticket pricing when you look at those 2 segments?
Yeah, the fact that you have 2 kids, my eyes lit up. I thought, oh, perfect customer.
So I got a big target on the back of my chest. That's for sure. Yep.
Yeah. So I think when we think about audience and segmentation, the first and foremost is that family, is that those adults, those children. And we think about really the seasonality of a theme park. It's really easy to tie it to when school schedules are. So when kids are in school, it's a little slower. When kids are out of school, it's a little busier. And that's how we kind of think of driving those key audiences and those people down to come visit during those peak times. And we know that that's when the demand's going to be there. So as you said, like these families, we want to make sure that during that spring break, this park is in your consideration set. So maybe we'll offer you a promotion that's like free dine for the entire family, or maybe a 4th day free, something like that pulls you over from a competitor, but still brings you down to the destination. And then when you get into different segments like Disney adults, we have a little bit more flexibility, right? They're not constrained by the school schedules. So we can try and push and pull them into periods that are maybe not as busy, where we need a little bit more demand. We can do that through just lower ticket prices in general, or different promotions that might appeal to them that aren't necessarily kid focused.
Yeah, this sounds a lot like just personalization in other parts of online travel. And so you're saying that you guys, what kind of blows my mind actually, Tay, is that not every school is going on spring break at the same time or have the same winter break. Is there a set of data that you guys subscribe to sort of target, let's say, the Northeast versus the West Coast for certain, initiatives every year? Or is this something that you guys have just been collecting the data for decades at this point?
Yeah, it's really as simple as we get on school board websites and we look at when spring breaks are. We look at the major markets.
What?
So really the major markets to Florida are Florida, Georgia, New Jersey, New York. There's one more out there I can't remember. So we hone in on those key areas where we know people are visiting from because we've gathered that data. And during the annual planning process, we look when those spring breaks hit. And you're right, they move, they change. And then so we can kind of understand when we think those certain segments will be coming down and when we want to put some maybe paid media or put some promotions in those specific markets behind it.
Yeah, I mean, you might be able to settle a bet here with my wife and I, but I mentioned I'd heard, because I used to manage parts of the Florida market earlier in my career on the hotel side. And the metric I had heard is that for Disney and Universal and any Florida-based theme park, 70% is really coming from Florida. Is that true?
I would say it's a little less than that, maybe 50 to 60, but it's still high. It's still a lot. Yeah, because you got to think it's the locals, it's the season passes. And don't forget, Florida's a very populous state. Outside of Orlando, we've got Miami, Jacksonville, Tampa. So really big DMAs that are really driving people over to us.
I'm curious as to, one, you have all the dynamics in here in terms of segmentation, whether it's a family of four or a couple that's a Disney adults who are probably, a little crazier. But also, I'm curious if you've had enough experience or at least understanding of the Orlando markets of when certain assets come into the market. So whether it be Universal with Harry Potter or anything new with Star Wars at Disney. And I'm just curious as to, from a analytics perspective, what type of uptick do you see when these type of assets come into a particular theme park? I remember I used to be earlier on in my career, I was at Six Flags corporate. And I remember very vividly, it was always about the new roller coaster that was being launched. And then all the marketing would sort of be put on that. And you would see this huge uptick in attendance. And so when you were talking about like bigger moves in terms of like Wizarding World of Harry Potter or Star Wars, how much of the significant bump have you seen in the theme park world when those type of assets are introduced?
Yeah, you're spot on. It's all about the new. It's all about the exciting. And the cool thing about being here in Orlando is Six Flags is great. They got some great rides, but their new roller coaster is maybe $30 million. Disney's new Avatar Land is like close to $1 billion. Like the scale is down here. And so what we do see is generally we do see a lot of lift. And there's different ways to look at it and different ways you can measure it. It's more of a long-term horizon, but it can be anywhere from maybe 10 to 15%. In those immediate months that we're seeing year over year. The challenge, though, you might not know this, Mario, is you also have to understand the deferral impacts of it. Because these theme parks operate every year, every day, because I'm building and I've advertised, for example, Epic Universe, a brand new theme park's opening in May 22nd, 2025.
Yeah,
this year.
I was going to go there, Tay.
Yeah. What we're probably going to see and what we're seeing right now is we're going to see people who are going to say, oh, you know what? We don't need to go right now. We don't need to go in Q1 or even early Q2. We should put off our trip. We should defer it because we want to wait till the new guy opens. So when they did Harry Potter Land, when Disney did Star Wars, when they did Avatar, we felt some of that deferral. So it's kind of trying to balance like, okay, the end of the race, I see the finish line. We're going to have this new thing, but while I'm running it, I'm struggling. I'm feeling some challenges there. So it's kind of this ebb and flow of new attractions versus how do we keep people coming even when the stuff's not open.
Well, especially when you talk about Epic, right? Because you basically got 4 different worlds. You've got Super Mario Land, a new Harry Potter Land. And what are the other 2?
You have How to Train Your Dragon, which is an animated series, has three movies and a series. And then you have monsters. So like think back to the 1930s, like Frankenstein, Dracula. That one is going to be that. There's 2 new rides that they're going to have. They've been touting. The Monsters ride is going to be really cool, has some great animatronics. And then the Harry Potter Land is going to have this really cool ride that I think are going to be groundbreaking stuff.
Yeah, that with all those parks kind of coming into the market, is Disney just shaking in their boots? Like, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, no, that's like the eternal question. And look at what they're saying and look at what they're doing. They're not necessarily putting out a public front that they're worried about it. And their most recent earnings call, it was brought up to their CFO and an analyst asked, hey, what do you guys think about it? And he said, we are expecting 6 to 8% operating income growth in the second half of 2025 in our park segment. And what we've seen in the past is new openings have helped us overall. I probably don't take as much of an optimistic approach as that. I think there's real risk to Disney in this new opening. And it's not so much about a guest saying, hey, I'll go to Epic Universe instead of going to Magic Kingdom. For Florida markets, for the visitors here, it's more so about people saying, I'm going to go to Universal for my whole vacation and spend my 3 days there instead of going to Disney. And that's Universal's bet. They're trying to change the consumer behavior from staying at Disney and adding a day on at Universal to staying at Universal and adding no days on at Disney.
Right. So you think that this is going to, one, possibly cannibalize Universal's existing business, but definitely change the travel patterns for anybody who's coming to Disney.
Yeah, and I think for Universal, the cannibalization risk they're kind of addressing. So in theory, instead of going to Islands of Adventure, which is their park, and going to Epic instead, right now they're only offering 3-day tickets. So you have to buy a 3-day ticket package in order to experience Epic in the new year. So they're concerned about that, and they're pushing this structure on the tickets to try and amend that. And we'll see how that works for them.
So you have to buy a 3-day ticket to get into Epic. What's
right now?
Right now. So, okay. So there it is, right? You're like, they're going to capture the initial, burst of demand that comes in. They're going to force them into the third day for the most part, because there aren't any 3-day park hoppers, are there, for Disney? I'm speaking from parent perspective of how we sort of evaluate a vacation. I'm just, spitball.
Yeah, you can buy a 3-day ticket and all 3 days can have park hopper on them. They will gladly sell that to you.
Okay, so you think that, well, one, are you excited about Epic? Because this is monumental. This is like having 4 new parks open in one market that's been being developed for, I probably say, the greater part of a decade, right?
Yeah, like how often do you get to go to a new theme park opening? Like the last one that opened here in Orlando was 1999. I was not there. Wish I could have been. So yeah, no, I'm very excited. I'm excited that the investment that we're getting into Orlando in the marketing behind it, Orlando remains a top tourism destination, but there's competition out there, right? Vegas, New York, a lot of international. So as a resident here and as someone who's excited about the industry, I'm very excited that we're continuing to invest and grow.
Yeah, that's amazing. So switching gears a little bit in terms of regional theme parks, like I said, I'm an ex Six Flags guy. Obviously, you may have remembered that Cedar Fair and Six Flags have recently merged. How do you think they approach their strategy with, I guess, more regionalized markets versus, these big destinations of, Southern California and Orlando? What do you think are the main differences? Obviously, there's a season pass strategy. Obviously, there's 1-day tickets and group that they work through. But what are sort of the key differentiators? Because I think you worked in Tampa at some point. There's SeaWorld. There's other types of product there. What is the main difference from a regional park strategy versus a destination?
Yeah, so I worked in 2 regional parks. I worked for Cedar Fair, Kings Island, and I got to work for the Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, Virginia. Randomly, there's one there. So I've worked in 2 of those regional players. It's kind of the things that you pointed out. It's much more focused on the domestic or the local people first and foremost, and then those key domestic markets that are within a drive or overnight is what we call that. You're not going to get someone from California to come over to Virginia to go to Williamsburg. It's just not going to happen. And you're not going to get international people flying into San Antonio, Texas, just to go to the SeaWorld there. Probably not going to happen. So the way you think about it is you're much more reliant upon that annual pass base and those repeat visitations, and you invest a lot more time and energy into that. So one way to think about that is looking at Six Flags. I can go online and buy an annual pass for any of their parks right now. For Disney World, I can't do that because they restrict the amount of annual passes that they sell, because a domestic guest who's buying those tickets is a little bit more valuable or spends more than those annual pass members. And they have some capacity constraints. So they want to balance that. Whereas a regional theme park, I've got room. I want you guys to come in all day, come in every weekend. I'll take my tickets. I'll take my passes. And I want you to repeat that every year for me.
So, you bring up a good point here, which I think is a shocker for lots of parents, is the in-park spend, right? So the season pass sort of, you get a discount on visits essentially, but you get in the park and you're still subjected to $15 Coca-Colas and, a $50, stuffed animal or whatever it is. When you've experienced these sort of strategy sessions, Where does the in-park spend or the per cap sort of sit in your overall strategy?
I would say it's second. And the idea that admissions is always first, and we always are trying to protect that rate. But in park, and for our listeners, that's going to be like the food, the beverage, the merchandise, and what we call ancillary spend. Think of like front of line passes that guests are going to want to purchase. Those are still important because they add up, but getting the person into the park and getting them to pay is the first and foremost priority.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And then once you have them, you have this captive audience. And you can, obviously, you have sponsorship dollars and different things that you can subject them to. You brought up cut the line passes or flash passes. Or I used to work for another company that specialized in virtual queuing and things of this nature. I mean, it's been around for a while, but I think this is a major decision that many people run into once they get in the park and they start to see the crowds. What do you observe as the buying pattern for people? How many people sort of book, and I'm not asking you to give any trade secrets away or anything like that, but like in your opinion, how many book the flash passes or the skip the line passes prior to arriving to the park versus people who are in the park and are like, I gotta have my kids stop yelling at me and we're gonna get the flash pass, right? Any idea around that? Because I think what's interesting about our conversation is that you can really inform a lot of families and people who are trying to get to the park by like understanding sort of dynamics, like when's the best time to buy? Should they plan ahead? Which I'm guessing it is really interesting to hear some hard numbers around.
Yeah, not as many people buy it ahead of time as the parks want. They want you to buy it ahead of time. They want to secure that dollar. They want you to lock it in. A lot more people are buying it when they're entering the parks, when they're thinking about what they're doing, when they're trying to plan their day and understanding, oh yeah, let's do that. Just to give you an example, it still surprises me. There is a good chunk of people, 10, 20%, who arrive in Orlando who do not know what parks they're going to. There's a whole strategy around selling tickets and doing all that. So it just gives you an idea of like, you would think people would be planning ahead, but there's still a lot of people who just don't want to. So for these skip the line products, it's about educating the guest, first of all, because they're not as easy to understand. There's different levels that give you different levels of access. And then there's also the pricing into it. And the pricing has become more dynamic and more variable on all these different companies. And they've been able to push demand in front of that. But it's also about capturing it like right at that pain point. So a lot of parks have added the QR code. You can scan in the line and buy it right on your phone and just hop over. And that's been really great for them. One of the big things that's recently happened is for many, many years, all the other parks charged for this front of line access. Disney did not. And COVID happened and they finally started doing it. They used it as an excuse. And most recently in the past few months, they finally launched their product that allows you to pay once and go on every ride once throughout the day. And it's been very interesting because, to give our listeners an example, the highest price ticket right now for Disney World in 2025 is $199. This front of line pass, it's variably priced. The highest it will go is $400. And this past Thanksgiving, we had people paying that and it sold out. So demand for these attractions kind of is even outpacing demand to get into the park if you look at it that way. So it's very interesting, and it'll be very interesting to see where this continues to ebb and flow into the future.
Elevate your travel business with Victory Live, the platform featuring $6 billion in professional sports, concerts, festivals, and theater inventory, including Broadway hits, Las Vegas shows, and top events like Coachella and the Super Bowl. With global content sourced directly from rights holders or approved ticket brokers, Victory Live offers net rates, seamless API connectivity, white label solutions, and a B2B portal for travel agents. Visit victorylive.com for more information and tell them that the Tickets to Travel podcast sent you. See, that's nuts. I was last year at my 8-year-old son. We had dropped off my older son at a camp, and we decided he's like, Dad, I'm a coaster guy now. He's 8 years old, and so we ended up going to Busch Gardens, and I was doing everything I could as a guy who sort of was adjacent or worked in the industry. I said, no, we're going to book the Flash Pass or the Skip the Line Pass, and we're going to get in. We started experiencing some of these rides, and it seems like a good idea, Tay, right? To get the Skip the Line Pass. But my 8-year-old, after 2 of these, I mean, skipping the line, getting shaken around, spun around, loop to loop. He got sick. He couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
He couldn't do it anymore. So we basically, he's like, I can't, it was hot, it's Florida. And he was just like, I'm done, Dad. So I think we got our money's worth in terms of getting access and, skipping the line. But again, like you can't really measure the activity level or what the kid can actually, take on. And we ended up giving them away. I had to take them back to the car and we ended up giving them away. But at the same time, we were grateful that it was there. And I do understand how much of a large strategy it is to sort of capture these guests. And I didn't know that so many people did not know which park they wanted to go to. Like, what's the sort of number around that as a percentage?
Yeah, I would say maybe 10, 15, 20%. If you think about it, there's all these ticket sellers in Florida. You drive down the road, you see Disney tickets for X dollars. They're all legitimate sellers and they're all trying to get people to come to your park. And it's very competitive where that specific segment or channel, each offering, so Disney, Universal, SeaWorld will have a promo in there, a special promo where it's like buy one day, get second day free, get a free water park, all these different things. So they're actually pretty good deals because they want to try and capture you because they know your intent is pretty high and it's very competitive.
Yeah, you're talking about all these places on 92 and Kissimmee, right? Like there's all these different places. Typically that's ticketing strategy as well, right? Like that is one, there's if you plan ahead and then there's, I think someone once told me that depending on how many miles out from the park you are, there are different prices as well at these various, shacks or ticket shacks or whatever they might be. Is that true?
No, it shouldn't be. It should be just consistent for Central Florida. But maybe some of these sellers get a little creative. When I was at Disney and I was on the ticketing team, we did like a little undercover stuff where we dressed up as tourists and went to one of these places and we're like, oh yeah, that's the product we told you to sell. You're selling it. So it was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, they are kind of like the mafia, right? Like you guys got, checking off to make sure people are in line. That makes a whole lot of sense. And so here on Tickets to Travel, obviously we're talking about the travel experience, which is a ticket plus hotel. Being from these various theme park companies, how often did you sit with revenue management to sort of create these packages? And was it kind of a free-flowing thing? How did that strategy sort of work itself out with hotels? I understand the ticketing side, but were you lockstep with the revenue managers at the hotels as well?
So in my experience, it's two separate teams. One team sets what we call the rack rates for both the tickets and the hotels and does the promotion. And then you have a separate team that is kind of what you would mention is the revenue management team that is constantly adjusting these rates on a daily and an hourly basis. The idea behind the promos and whether to include them in hotels and ticket packages was done by this first team in a kind of cohesive look where we would say, hey, it's going to be this summer season. We need to drive visitation for Q4. What promos can we do? And it's always popular to offer a ticket package and discount the hotel. And then we could or offer a ticket package, just the tickets to people who don't want hotel. But we would kind of look at that holistically to understand what would be the overall revenue impact to the site or the location.
Makes sense. You just feel like depending, like in the Disney parks, for example, depending on whether or not you're on the monorail or if you're off the monorail, there's definitely different hotel rates associated to that. And so I thought that it was a little bit more in line, like especially when they're doing full packages, maybe through Disney experiences or something, they sort of look at it that way because there's probably a more uniform margin that they're trying to hit, a margin goal that they're trying to hit. But that's interesting to understand that, essentially they work separately, right? Ticket strategy and revenue management, hotel revenue management strategy. And then it all just sort of seamlessly works when it comes to the demand that's coming to each one of those parks.
Well, when we would work closely with the revenue management team and, they would say, hey, there's a need period for this period at this hotel. We would say, okay, let's do a discount for this hotel or let's exclude them. So we would work with them, but they sat in a different building and we sat in a different building. It was two different teams where one was more maybe high level strategic and then one was working on the daily execution of it.
Makes sense. Yeah. And people don't realize how huge these companies are and just the operational sort of complexity that goes on in terms of the strategy that's there. As someone who's been in this world, with the exception of Epic, What are some other things that you're excited about, or things that I guess a normal fan or guest should understand about planning their trip to a theme park, whether it be a regional theme park or a destination theme park like a Disney or a Universal?
Yeah, I think it's always the first thing I think about is it's always going to be more expensive to stay at the destination, right? Because there's always going to be a benefit of being in proximity. But there's some really nice hotels and there's some really nice offerings, what we call write-off property. There's a Four Seasons, there's a Ritz, JW's, there's a new Conrad here in Orlando. So when you're thinking about your vacation, do shop around a little bit. Look at the destination, see what they're offering you on a package, but don't be afraid to kind of separate the ticket from the hotel and see if you can stay over here, maybe get a little better experience for a little lower price and still be able to go to the parks. That's one thing I would think about as you're planning your trip. And then the next thing is really think about the seasonal aspect of when you want to go, because we talked about these variable ticket pricing and these dynamic ticket pricing. If you're flexible on your days by a week, a month, you can get significantly better discounts just because you're willing to have that flexibility and you don't have to wait for a sale or you don't have to hunt around for anything. So think about when you're trying to go and the timing of that. Yeah, no, those are some things I would think about.
These are valuable insights. I mean, I always joke, my wife and I, we both work in the travel industry or online travel industry, and I don't travel when other people travel, Tay. It's just the day before Thanksgiving. Are you nuts? Are you crazy? Typically what we would do as a family, and these are our trips to Orlando, is we go Thanksgiving week, but we go the weekend before, and then we fly back on Thanksgiving Day. And then that way we miss everything. And then the ticket prices are kind of static because it's not as busy. But I think on top of all of that is the weather. I never understood why families subject themselves to Florida heat in the summer when it's peak crowds and it's so hot there. And so November just seems like the right thing to do. Would you agree, or is there other?
100%. September's great. Right before November, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, that's a prime time to go. And then now we're just rolling to January, February. I'm very excited to go to the parks because it's going to be nobody there. The weather's going to be great. It is a good time to go.
That's amazing. And so, I think I alluded to this earlier, but is there anything big that's at least US based? I know in Asia, Tokyo, there's a few other parks that are kind of opening up. Like, is there anything for consumers who want to go internationally? Are there particular parks that have really kind of caught your attention that could be worth planning an even bigger trip? Like I think about, Village Roadshow parks in Australia, or any of the, some of the Merlin Entertainment type of parks that are in Europe. What are some of the other things that are more international theme parks that you have your eyes on or have been studying? Because I know you're a little bit of a nerd for this type of stuff.
Yeah. So Disneyland Paris is an interesting one. So if our listeners are old enough to know, Disneyland Paris has been around for a while. It's called Euro Disney, and it didn't really perform well. It was a public company. Disney took it private not too long ago, and they've really invested a lot into that park, over $2 billion over the past few years to really expand it, change it. And it wasn't a bad park. It had some really nice stuff there, but they've opened up one section of that and they're working on the other one. So that would be a cool one. If you pair that with a Paris trip, it's about 45 minutes outside the city on a train. And then another park it does a really good job is Tokyo Disney. And this one is interesting. A lot of people don't know is it's not owned by Disney. It's purely a licensing play. And this company called Oriental Land Company runs it. And they have like a Magic Kingdom park that's very similar to the one here. But then they have this other park called Tokyo DisneySea that is not anywhere else in the world. And everyone who goes, I haven't been yet, but all my friends have gone, love it. And they say it's a really cool opportunity to try new stuff, but it's got the Disney flair. And they just expanded and did about $1 billion investment in some new offerings there. So those are some of the, when I keep an eye on international, that kind of gets me excited with those investments and seeing what's going to happen.
One of my bucket list things is when I have to get to Tokyo, but my kids are like, we got to go to Super Mario Land. So what have you heard about the Super Mario Land that's going to be opening up at Epic? Is it on par with the one that's in Tokyo or the one that's in I guess, LA currently? Or so what are your thoughts or what have you heard?
Yeah, I'm also very excited. You can tell your kids I'm ready for it too. I still play my Mario games. So what the cool thing about it is we've had kind of one section of the land has opened in California, and then in Japan they just opened like this second section, which if people are familiar with the Donkey Kong character, it's this new roller coaster over there. That's pretty cool. The track disappears. It's some new technology. So that's unique to Japan right now. Here in Florida, we're going to get both the original Mario section and this Donkey Kong section. So it'll be bigger than what's over in Hollywood right now. Like I said, very excited to see that. I think it has some really cool characters, some really great IP, and I think it'll be really cool for all generations to experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, you sold it. You sold it for me. I think I mentioned I was prepping for our talk today, and I was telling my son, he's 11, that Epic was opening up, and he's like, okay, so are we going? I'm like, I don't know that. We usually want to work the kinks out first. And,
yeah.
Do you see that that's the case? Does it take, maybe a couple of months or so for them to figure out all of the operational pieces, maybe merchandising and food and beverage, things of that within the park? Like when you're opening a brand new park, what have you seen?
Yeah, I've seen it gone both ways. And I've seen things where it opens and it's great and it works perfectly and you've got lines out the door, demand's great. I've seen openings where it's the grand opening and the ride doesn't work for 2 weeks. And it is a big disappointment to a lot of people. And you don't want to lead with a negative connotation right off the bat. You want to lead with this positiveness. So I'm excited for it. I'm hopeful that I know they're working on it. I can see it being built. It's very cool. But it will be interesting to see if every ride, every aspect, every little detail is up and running and ready to go, because the countdown is on and it's a big park with a lot of moving pieces. So yeah, I don't think waiting a little bit would be a bad idea. Don't tell Universal I said that because they want you to come as soon as they can.
No, just getting your honest opinion is because I'm like trying to, hold them off, because I thought it was done with Orlando for a little while. You know what I mean? Like now you got a new park and they're like, well, now they're getting a little bit older. There's more thrill-seeking rides. They just closed King to Ka here in New Jersey, so it's one of those things where my kids are like, we can get on these rides now, right? Like, let's go to the new rides. Let's go do all this. And, I'm sure the big difference between, sort of those destination parks and thrill seekers, which I know was a particular audience that, Six Flags went after, which is mainly teenagers. So I've got guys who are like cusp of being teenagers. And so, in your opinion, I mean, I don't know if you're a coaster guy or not, but like what is your favorite, or I guess maybe people don't know, is the best park from a coaster perspective or a thrill seeking perspective?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's not going to be a Disney park. They have great rides, they have great attractions, but it's not that thrill. Universal has some great thrills and they've invested a lot more in those coasters. Personally, I'm biased. I think Williamsburg in Virginia, the Busch Gardens there has some really great coasters, things like that. The Busch Gardens in Tampa does some great things. And then we can't forget about, I don't know if you've been to Cedar Point, which is Cedar Fair's like flagship park. That peninsula they're on is just chock full of roller coasters. So definitely the regional plays tend to have a little bit more thrill because that's what people are maybe seeking in those markets a little bit more and less on the IP focus.
Yeah, I mean, no, I have not been to Cedar Fair, but I definitely need to go. My role at Six Flags Corporate 15 years ago or whatever it was the distribution guy. So we would put in different ticketing distribution initiatives with certain clients, whether that be Amex or Chase or whoever it was. And then we would go to each one of the parks and sort of implement the program. So there I was in a shirt and tie riding every single roller coaster, which is funny to my kids that there's photos of me with Bugs Bunny getting on a roller coaster. But it was a great time. And I understand the culture of theme parks and the difference between a theme park, an amusement park, and a carnival, which I think if you're not in the industry, I think a lot of people will say, oh, I've been to that amusement park before, and they don't understand how expensive that is, right? And I know but like, what is sort of your opinion of what's the difference between a theme park and an amusement park? So that I think the audience who's listening to this is very respectful of how this industry is seen. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so for me, a theme park is something that's heavy on story and IP, and it has a theme, right? A good theme. So think your Disney, think your Universal, even your Busch Gardens have one here in Florida is Africa themed, the one in Williamsburg is like Europe themed. Then you think your amusement parks are maybe more of less theme, but more rides. So even your SeaWorlds, the theme isn't necessarily aquatic animals. It's more so just park. Your Six Flags, they tend to be more rides, attractions. Same with your Cedar Fair. So I would think those would be more on the amusement park front.
Yeah, it's like I said, though, even when I worked at corporate, people are like, oh, you work at Six Flags. Which ride do you operate? I'm like, no. I do the corporate B2B deals. And, so it's hard. And I know, there's always this sort of connotation of, oh, there's carnies too. There's carnival of people, and then there's amusement parks, and there's this. And so I think it all comes down to strategy, though, right? Like, who really focuses on the holistic strategy, whether it be ticketing, in-park spends, things of that nature, and obviously the IP and the theming around each one, and different sections of the park sort of lend its ear to sponsorship opportunities and other things where a major sponsor would want to be tied in with that particular theme, right? So, speaking of sponsorships, that's a really big part of the overall P&L, I think, for a lot of these type of companies. What were some of the, I guess, more interesting activations that you saw from a sponsorship side? Because I asked the question because, obviously Tickets to Travel, we look at a lot of live events, and these theme parks, one, they have a ton of live events, sometimes concerts within each. And I'm just curious about, what sort of strategy you guys looked at in terms of whether it's a sponsorship activation, or maybe you had, I don't know, Beyonce on property to do a concert, something like that. Like, was there a particular strategy that you guys sort of were, hey, plug and play, this is what we do when we have a live event in the park? Or is it more like, hey, we're just going to see how this goes, normal ticketing strategy?
Yeah. So when it comes to sponsorships, they're hard to get, but they're good when you get them, right? So it's all about building those relationships with those brands and companies that are willing to see the value that being co-listed with someone like Disney presents to them. And it can be a challenge because when you think about traditional marketing, you have to have metrics, you have to have proven, hey, this is my cost of acquisition, this is how many conversions I did. When you use sponsorship in a theme park, it's a little harder to do that, right? Having my name on a roller coaster, what value is that really getting? So we had special teams who would look at that and would go out and try and find those specific companies who wanted to engage. Easy, low-hanging fruit was companies we were already working with. So you'll find a lot of these theme parks, Coca-Cola, they buy from Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola also is a sponsor, right? Okay, easy. That's a good one. M&M's, food, different foods there. But one of the interesting ones I like the most is that at Disney World, they built a new land for Toy Story. And the idea is you shrink down to the size of a kid. And so you're in Andy's backyard and everything's life-size, or larger than life, and you feel like a toy. And one of the sponsorships that they were able to bring in was Baby Bell cheeses. So think those red wax-covered cheeses. You know those. But what they were able to do is those are actually in the park next to the food and beverage location. It's this, and you can sit on them, and they've moved them in a way, and it doesn't say Baby Bell, so it still holds the integrity of the park. But if you look at it, you're like, oh, that's that cheese. Like, I know that red wax covering. So that was really interesting one. And then there's also a clock. The name escapes me, but all of the clocks on Main Street at the Magic Kingdom have this clock name on them. So normally the clock would just be empty. Now they were able to put this name, and they become the official timepiece of Disney World. So it's more about finding these brands, these people who want to engage, and then getting creative and how they can be part of your park and how they can really engage. Another one was Ziploc. On the back of the roller coaster, you're sitting down, you're about to ride. You could put your stuff in the little bag, and the bag was Ziploc branded, right? So it would secure your stuff. So you had an instance there where it kind of was a little more seamless. So those are just some of the examples that I've really enjoyed over the years.
No, I remember, I think it was on Thunder Mountain, there was those Ziploc bags, right? Because I remember, first of all, we got the Flash Pass on that. So we were basically going on it over and over and over again, because it's right in the middle, right? For little kids to preteens. And my wife, I remember she was sitting next to me, and she's like, what a great sponsorship. This makes so much sense. And obviously it worked, right? Because I'm talking about it right now. Really amazing insights here, Tay. What I always like to do when I have a guest on Tickets to Travel is, if you had unlimited budget, what would you like to do as the perfect travel experience? Usually we take this from a from a live event perspective. Could be a live event, could be a theme park, but like if you didn't have to worry about the budget at all, what would be the perfect travel experience for Tay?
Yeah, so this will be a different kind of live event. So I would love to fly first class. I got to make sure I put that out there, put that in the universe, to Australia. Never been there, but love the idea of it, love everything, kind of the culture of the people. Go down there, stay by the beach, stay in Sydney, the harbor, do the bridge, maybe go into the outback a little bit, experience that. But the one thing I would be going there for is to do shark diving with great white sharks. I would love to do that.
In the cages.
So in the cages, and hopefully it's cages. But yeah, that would be my live experience that I would love to travel to in the future.
So you're an adventure travel guide, because that's like a bucket list for lots of people who are either they're hiking Kilimanjaro or, they want to go spearfishing, or just, are you a scuba diver as well? Is that?
I'm not a scuba diver. I wouldn't say I'm a super adventurous kind of traveler. I love like a nice hotel with a pool and getting pampered. This one just kind of has always stuck out to me. And it might be that one thing I do that maybe I really like it. I keep going on the adventure piece, or I'm like, ooh, that wasn't for me, and I'm going to skip the next one.
Well, as you said earlier, we will put this out to the universe and make sure that your perfect travel experience does come to fruition at some point. So I want to thank you, Tay, for taking the time and lending your expertise. And hopefully you'll come back and see us at another time. And so thank you for joining us on Tickets to Travel.
All right. Thank you so much, Mario. I appreciate it.
Take care. Attention travel and ticketing innovators. Whether you're a startup disrupting the industry or an established company ready to take your distribution strategy to the next level, Expo Travel is your ultimate partner in online travel and ticketing distribution. We specialize in helping businesses of all sizes optimize their operations, expand their reach, and unlock new revenue streams. And for startups looking to grow, we partnered with top venture capital syndicates to help you secure the funding you need to turn bold ideas into thriving businesses. From refining businesses to scaling operations and raising capital, Expo Travel is here to drive your success. Visit Expo Travel today. That's xpotravel.com for a consultation. And let's transform the way the world travels, one innovation at a time. Expo Travel, because the future of travel and ticketing starts with you.